Hi everyone, I'm Ariel Celia, behavioral scientist, recovering academic, and now consultant in tobacco harm reduction. My disclosures are on the screen, but this is my personal channel and it's not overseen or funded by my employers or clients. Today we're going to cover a brand new article just published in the journal Tobacco Control. Tobacco control, at least as goes by traditional metrics like impact factor, is one of the best journals in the field. It's got the highest impact factor, which means has to do with the citation of these articles relative to the number of articles that they publish. This article is titled "Where There's Smoke Less, There's Fire: Viral Oral Nicotine Pouch Content on TikTok and Market Growth." So it's kind of a grabby or alarmist headline to begin with, and it looks at sales of oral nicotine pouches such as Zyn or On, and TikTok viral videos on it, and it claims to find an association here. So let's dive into the abstract. The emergence of viral memes about oral nicotine products on TikTok is concerning, as popular content on a youth-centered platform may motivate youth use. They're looking at Nielsen retail data aggregated across the entire US from January 2021 to October 2023. The first spike was in autumn 2022, representing 14.4% of views, followed by a second spike in summer to fall 23 at 80.9% of views. These percentages sound high, but it's not by any means percent of views on all of TikTok. It's the percent within the set of TikTok videos that they've assembled for this study, which is specific to those having nicotine pouch hashtags. Moving on, they used a joint point regression analysis that identified a single inflection point. What this analysis does, I'll go into it in more detail later, but it essentially finds where the slope of a trend changes significantly. So they found that the slope changes essentially in April 2023, following the first spike and preceding the second. The conclusions, maybe not surprisingly considering the way they've set up the analysis, is that they claim to find that a viral spike in TikTok views precedes a significant acceleration in pouch sales. Although further research is needed to determine whether TikTok views offer a reliable predictor of sales, our findings suggest that spikes in specific content signaling effective penetration of youth subcultures may be indicative of acute market changes. So essentially they're claiming that they find a correlation between these viral TikTok videos about pouches and sales of pouches. If you're curious about exactly which videos they got, these are all the hashtags that they searched for. So a lot of Zyn, On pouches, Velo pouches. All in all, they found about 10,000 videos with these search criteria, but at the time of doing this analysis, only about 3,000 were still available on TikTok. So the other ones were kind of dropped from the analysis. So keep in mind as we go through this, all of these findings are on about 3,000 TikTok videos. This is the main result that authors are using to try to paint TikTok trends as a driver of oral pouch sales in the US. The main thing that's wrong with this analysis is that it's a really misspecified model. The analysis that they're doing is completely inappropriate for the data points. This looks like an exponential increase, but the way that they're running the analysis here is they're forcing all of these data points to fit onto two lines, straight lines, and they're finding where the slope of those lines changes. So the model kind of does a reasonable job if you squint, but clearly backing up and looking bigger picture, this is exponential growth in nicotine pouch sales. And natural systems like sales, especially when you introduce a new product into the market, that has an exponential increase as the product is kind of taking off and making its way through the market. So essentially all this joint point analysis is doing is detecting that this is not a straight line the whole way through. And really it's just describing a basic property of exponential increase, which is that the slope is continually changing. And it tries to find the best point at which that happens, but it's not really meaningful because the whole slope is continually changing during this phase of exponential growth. Some other things that are just strange are that there's seasonality here that's not really well accounted for. This is well known in cigarette sales, for example. There's like consumption tends to decrease during the winter when, especially in January, when people have New Year's resolutions to stop or cut down, and when people don't want to go outside in the cold weather to smoke. There's clear seasonality. I also see some evidence of seasonality here for pouches. So it looks like there's a spike kind of consistently in the fall there in 2021, and then again in the fall in 2022. And it's changing too fast here to really tell. But my point here is that there's a lot of variability in the data set that's not easily accounted for by forcing it into two straight lines or by trying to map on TikTok trends. One of the other strange things about the results that doesn't really align with the story that they're trying to tell here is that sales actually decrease during the first viral spike. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we fully believe that TikTok trends can influence sales. This is a plausible hypothesis. It might even be true to some extent that viral trends on TikTok influence people's real-world behavior. But my problem here is that they're not really considering the alternative explanation or the aspects of the data that don't support the hypothesis. So during viral spike A, let's say this is the first wave where oral pouches were really making a wave on TikTok. Why would sales be decreasing during that period? It doesn't make sense. You would expect sales to increase as the viral spike went on. The other part that really doesn't make sense is that the point that they claim the slope changes, sales suddenly surged in April 2023 is when they identified this change of slope. But why would that make sense? Because that's 6 months after the viral spike A. Given the short attention span on TikTok, why would somebody learn about oral products, develop an interest during autumn 2022, and then wait 6 months or longer to buy pouches? It doesn't make sense to have that large of a delay. For viral spike B, there's nothing really informative one way or the other here because they don't look at sales data beyond that point. So it's not really possible to tell how viral spike B might have affected sales trends. So all in all, the idea that sales trends follow viral spikes in TikTok is not really supported here. In fact, sales were increasing before viral spike A. So why isn't the opposite direction equally interpreted by the authors? Why isn't it the case that they think rising sales drives people to make videos about a new product that they're already buying? That's not really given equal credence by the authors. The results are sort of selectively interpreted to align with what they think is happening. To be fair, the authors do allude to some of these limitations. So they say here, the prevalence of ONP-related videos on TikTok could be a cause and or an indicator of market growth. So here they at least allow the possibility of reverse causality. And then in limitations, they say the study's design does not support causal claims related to the relationship. We cannot rule out other potential causes, for example. But the problem is, this is buried in the discussion section. And in the main abstract, which is the only thing that most people will read, it certainly paints it as a one-directional relationship where sales follow TikTok views. So it says, following 3 years of steady market growth, a viral spike in TikTok views precedes a significant acceleration in ONP sales, followed by a larger spike in views. But again, that's really misleading because this shows exponential growth. There's not a sudden, unexpected acceleration. It was already accelerating constantly as part of exponential growth of this product. And then they sort of caution it, saying that they don't know that whether TikTok views are reliably predictive of sales, but our findings suggest that spikes in specific content signaling effective penetration of youth subcultures may be indicative of acute market changes. So they're clearly using TikTok views as a leading indicator or a predictor of sales, when really I think the data could maybe more convincingly go in the opposite direction. And that's one of my larger criticisms about this research that involves social media use. In most of these papers, social media users are kind of treated as passive consumers of whatever content that the algorithm shows to them and are therefore influenceable by whatever content they see, but it doesn't really allow for user agency. It doesn't recognize the fact that users go on social media platforms and actively seek out the content that they're interested in, and in some cases produce the content that they're already interested in. And again, from a broader perspective, this is published in a really good journal. This is quite a high impact factor compared to other journals that look at tobacco use. So it's not like I'm picking on a paper that was published in a predatory journal or a paper from a paper mill. These are legitimate tobacco control researchers publishing in one of the top journals in the field. Yet, unfortunately, very basic things were able to get through peer review. So overall, my issues with this paper are that the analysis is really not appropriate for the data. It forces an exponential increase of pouch sales onto 2 straight lines, detects a slope change, and interprets that as evidence that TikTok videos increase sales when they were already increasing exponentially. So detecting a slope change is really just describing and confirming that there's exponential growth. There's also pretty glaring inconsistencies between the data and the interpretation that the authors have. So sales were already rising leading up to both TikTok videos, and sales actually were decreasing during viral video 1. And this might be due to seasonality, but if you really had a viral video that was causally increasing pouch sales, you would expect it to increase during the period under question. And it's also not plausible that the effect of viral video 1 would be delayed for 6 months after the viral phase ended. And again, I'm not ruling out that TikTok and social media exposure might increase sales by attracting people to use these products, but the case is not made here, and there's also an equally plausible, if not more plausible, reverse causal explanation, where the things that people are already doing or interested in drives their social media behavior, rather than sort of falling victim of what they happen to passively see on social media. I'll end there for now. Thank you for your attention, and if there's any other questions or requests for papers to cover, drop them in the comments.